person that I worked with that I spent as much time as I did with John Kovalchuk. He taught me many, many things. Early on, he taught me to love Ukrainians. I didn't even know where Ukraine was. And John was passionate about his heritage. So much so that almost from the day that I met John until I retired, my office door, on the back of my office door, was a full Ukrainian flag. And the latest one I had, in the middle of the flag, it had the Ukrainian trident as well. So I had the whole thing. John loved Ukraine. He conveyed that to me. And early on, just about the time of Perestroika and the collapse of the former Soviet Union, John took me with him to visit Ukraine. And I believe it was the first time that he had been in Ukraine, because he had left, of course, his parents were in South America. And we arrived in Moscow, because everything went through Moscow, and there was some big congress going on. There's no place to stay. And so John and I slept on lawn chairs, little camping cots, in the middle of some office of the Baptist Convention of the Soviet Union, until we could get on the train and travel down to Kiev and then in Ukraine. Several interesting things happened during that time. One that has become almost apocryphal is the story of us getting arrested. And that is a true story. But now, John was not arrested, I was arrested. What had happened, for those who do not know the story, we traveled to we were staying in the city of Lutsk, and we traveled out to a collective farm to speak in one of the churches. And as we arrived at the church, one of the leaders of the local Communist Party accosted us and was very upset that we were there. And evidently did not feel like he had been given the respect that he should have been given. And so he kind of ranted and raved, and then we went in and had the service. And it was, of course, it went late. Ukrainian services often go long. And it was very late at night, probably close to midnight. And we were in the car driving back up the dirt road to the main road. And at the main road was this blue light flashing. And it was the police, and he indicated that we were under arrest and took us to the police station. And we're standing in the police station, not behind the desk, but in front of the desk. And the police officer puts a piece of paper in front of me and says, just sign this and everything will be okay. And I knew enough to know that I wasn't going to do that. And of course, John as well was encouraging me not to do that. And we went back and forth. And by this point, it's about almost 2 in the morning. And I indicated that I wanted to call the American Embassy because I was being held for no just cause. And that was the day that Mikhail Gorbachev was speaking at the United Nations. And so I wanted to create an international incident by calling the American Embassy. I figured that I would be safe, with Gorbachev at the United Nations. So the police officer went back behind the door and answered the phone, and there was a gentleman there standing at the counter in street clothes, and he began to kind of talk and get friendly and talk about how stupid all this was. Well, he was the KGB agent who was again trying to get me, go ahead and sign the paper, everything will be okay. Well, I did not do that. The policeman came back out and said we could go back to the hotel and come back in the morning, and the commandant will be there, and they'll work all this out. So we went back to the hotel that night, prayed all night long. And the next morning, went back to the police station, and the commandant didn't want to see me. He told me to stay in the car, don't worry about it. And the interesting thing was that when the Ukrainian brother who was our host went in to talk to the commandant asked him for a Bible. And he said, I didn't want to ask for a Bible in front of an American, but I'll ask you if you can have a Bible. And had a chance to share the gospel with him. We traveled from there to the city of Lviv. I remember when he told me about the book that he was writing. It was answers to questions. And as he interpreted the titles, I said, John, we need that in English. Because he had masterful answers to just some basic but very critical questions. And he was just, he was passionate about the message of truth. I remember how he struggled with taking on the chief editor role because he had such respect for the predecessor and did not feel that he was capable or qualified. But yet, of course, I couldn't read Ukrainian, but he would translate sometimes. And just the depth of understanding of the Bible and just his wisdom. Many times we would meet, and I would ask John for his counsel on how to deal with situations. He was an incredibly wise man. The picture I have right now, John, is this. Jesus said that when he goes back to heaven, he's going to prepare a place for us, that where he is, we can be there with him also. I just imagine that John is sitting in that place, in a rocking chair, drinking a cup of mate. I've never told Xenia this, but John and Xenia gave me a cup like John would use for mate. And when they were in Harrisburg, they would spend many days, like in the early afternoon, they would sit down and have a cup of mate together. And they wanted me to enjoy that with them. And I couldn't handle that tasting. But it sits in my little cabinet at home because John gave that to me. And it was important to him. But I imagine him there in that place in heaven, the rocking chair, sipping a cup of mate, and on the walls and the shelves around him are copies of Messages of Truth, where he poured his life into communicating the gospel in the language of the people that he loved, Ukrainians. I could also imagine that there's boxes and boxes and files of little slips of paper where people expressed a prayer or a concern. And John bore that. It gives me comfort to see John sit in the rocking chair, playing the guitar, singing, sipping some latte. And one other thing to share, and I apologize for going so long, but I love this man. And I know that genuinely he loved me as well. Sergio, where's Sergio go? I'm a little bit, I want to take a point of disagreeing with you. He told me that if he died first, I would do his service. If I died first, he would do my service. So, and so I feel a little bit of, but I remember just as John was anticipating retiring, and he began to have some health issues, and he had the mini stroke and had some vision issues, and he allowed me into his life because we were brothers. And I remember the day that I had to tell him he couldn't drive anymore in his work because his vision was affected and it was putting him at risk. And it was a conversation not as a boss to an employee, but it was a brother to a brother who was concerned about my friends' well-being. John was passionate about the work. I remember one day I came into the office and I noticed that he'd been working, it seemed like nonstop, because I knew what his calendar was. And I shocked him. I shocked him one day. He was at his desk working, and I came up to his desk, reached around and closed the book that he was working on. And I said, go home. And he was like, have you fired me? I said, no, you need to take a day off. Go home. Drink mate with Xenia. I don't want to see you till tomorrow. And he was shocked. But that's the kind of brother that John was to me. But I think of the verse that was printed on the posting on Facebook as well as on the program tonight. Fighting the good fight. When I think of that verse, the picture that comes to my mind is of John Kovalchuk. I watched him fight the fight for the gospel, fight the fight to get a hearing and respect for ethnic work in Pennsylvania, South Jersey, as well as across the Southern Baptist of Michigan. He didn't just battle me, he battled anyone you could meet to make the case for making sure that the gospel was accessible to everyone in every language. That's the legacy of John Kovalchuk, and I am profoundly grateful to have had my life intersected with his and with Zina's. They have profoundly blessed my life. I'm so grateful. Amen.